Hi everyone, I'm Paul Menig with Business Accelerants. Each session I have a conversation regarding the 7 forces in your business and career in the expectation that business owners and leaders will gain insight from getting more money from business and more time for their lives. Today we're going to talk about the risk of disruption and what you can do about it. With me is Joshua Keene, an insurance advisor to businesses. With everything that's gone on this year, it seems appropriate to connect the 2 dots of risk and disruption using insurance. But you'll see that after the fact payments is not nearly as important as what you can do to reduce your insurance payments by reducing the risk in your business. I can tell you that someone looking to buy a business literally appreciates a business that has handled risk in advance. Joshua, what are some of the plans or procedures that you ask about when first talking with a business person?
Well, whether it's a business owner or a CFO or a risk manager or anybody dealing with risk and insurance, they're going to be faced with some pretty tough questions from underwriters if they want the best rates, the best coverage, and even service from insurance carriers. If you're experienced with risks and that are faced by your type of business, you may already have documented systems in place and already have good answers to give carriers. But if this is something you haven't thought about, these questions can actually really be helpful, as they're often something a business person just overlooks or doesn't know they don't know. So that makes it a really useful exercise to put together these loss control systems. But it can also be challenging since we don't know what we don't know. Underwriters want to know what specific loss control systems you have to avoid the losses to begin with, and how are you implementing them. So while the biggest risks to a business, such as fire, cyber attack, or property damage, can be covered with the right insurance, the disruption or downtime caused by these losses can be extremely detrimental to the health of the business. And so each line of your insurance, examples being your business auto insurance, your general liability, your workers' comp, and a big new one is cyber, is going to have their own underwriters that are going to want to know how you're proactively protecting your business as it pertains to that type of risk. So an example on your business auto, for example, would be, do you have a fleet maintenance and fleet safety program in place? Do you train your drivers on defensive driving? What's your screening process for your new hires? On the property coverage or inland marine, for example, I have a contractor who kept having tools and equipment stolen out of vans, and they also had a van stolen with a bunch of equipment in it. And this was at a shop that was in a high crime area. So their solution was simply just having employees take the vans home at night. And if they had equipment over a certain dollar value amount, they would take that into a garage or into the house for storage overnight.
You just used a term that I've not heard before. I call it risk reduction or something, or a risk plan or things. You called it a loss control system. Is that a written document? Is that a procedure, a training plan, or maybe all of the above from what you just said?
Yeah, ideally it's all the above. And so that lingo, all of those terms work, but from an underwriter or insurance carrier perspective, that's usually what they're going to ask is, what are you doing for loss control on your business auto? What are you doing for loss control on your property, your cyber, and down the line for all your lines of coverage?
Help me if you would, please, because I'm thinking, okay, I'm filling out a form asking about insurance, and I've got maybe a tiny space to fill in, do you have this or do you have that? And then maybe I say yes or no or whatever. Do the underwriters actually expect me to submit to them a document showing that loss control system plan, and they look at it apparently?
If they're asking if you have the system in place and you're checking yes on that form, you should definitely be submitting a copy of the form or of your plan to the underwriter. Otherwise, there's a good chance they'll see that you checked yes on that, but they won't give you really any credit, or they'll just kind of overlook it because they want to see something on paper that's documented that shows that you're actually using it.
Okay. So that's where you, as the business insurance advisor, would go through with the business person. If they said yes, you'd be challenging them to say, do you have a document that describes what you do? And if so, let's get it and we'll attach it before I submit this to the underwriter.
Exactly. And then if they don't, either I myself or a third party will come in. We work with third party loss control companies that can come in and help put those systems together and train their people on how to implement them, so that when we do go to the carriers, we can show that we're being proactive about those things.
Okay, and you mentioned a type of insurance early on there that I think everybody has to deal with, which is workers' compensation. And most of us might think, well, we really don't have any control over that. It's just we have to have it. Yet when I walk into any factory, I typically see a sign saying X number of days since a lost day accident occurred, which I think that is the OSHA worker compensation related item, right?
I believe so. Yeah, that's an OSHA thing. That's something they're keeping track of. But obviously, your workers' comp insurance carrier is going to care a lot about that too. They're going to want to know, just like with the other lines, what are you doing to train your employees regularly on safety? Do you have a documented procedure to how to handle certain risks? And so it's definitely going to matter to your carriers too.
So I don't know if you followed it, but earlier this week, Governor Brown and regulatory people passed some new regulations for us that will require us to document our plan for social distancing in the business, document our plan for what we'll do if we have a case of COVID-19 and everything. Does that sound familiar to you?
It does sound familiar. It's not something I've helped the client with yet, but the loss control companies I work with, that's the main part of what they're doing right now. It used to be a lot of workers' comp safety and stuff like that. Of course, COVID is a covered workers' comp loss, but yeah, that's something they're definitely facing right now.
Okay. And what caught my attention there was some of the clients I'm working with, they now have 30 or 60 days, a very short amount of time to document what their plan is. Now, many of them have had a plan of some sort in place already since the beginning of this COVID-19 issue. But somehow there's some additional things that have to be done. And I imagine somebody has the chance of it being audited. I know the businesses I'm working with have that third-party audit possibility that somebody from OSHA could walk into their facility and demands to see what they're doing for cleanliness and social distancing and wearing masks and everything.
Yeah, and there's even, there's systems in place for other businesses and for your patrons, say if you're a restaurant or a retail place, to call and report anything that looks like you're not compliant. So they're really trying to enforce and make sure people are following through on those plans.
Okay. Some plans can be practiced, and I remember when I was a kid that I had to dive under a desk in case of a nuclear attack on the United States, and I had to file and walk outside a specific door in case of a fire and things like that. Imagine here in the Pacific Northwest, they had earthquake drills and what to do. I know my wife has various set of materials in containers in case of an earthquake. We know where they're at, assuming they didn't get moved by the earthquake. So a plan on paper is one thing, and practicing it is another. Some of the plans that we're talking about, you can't easily practice, probably. So do you have an example of that to yourself? Or
Yeah. So say that big earthquake does happen, or the big fire does occur, and you have the insurance coverage that's going to pay to get you back up and running eventually. But do you have a business continuity plan in place to make sure that you can keep running while you're waiting for your facility to be back up and running? Or what's the plan? So few businesses think about business continuity planning that actually just having it on paper is a really great start, because the exercise of developing the plan is usually going to involve everybody involved in the plan who would be implementing it. And so, and then at that point, beyond just having it actually done and written out, would be to evaluate. I would hope they're evaluating it every 6 months or so, maybe every year, for any changes in their business model, any products or services that change. And really important one is any changes in key staff. And so if the person that was going to call all your vendors or enact some part of the plan is no longer on your team, you should know who's going to replace that person in the plan.
I've heard the term business continuity plan before. I have never actually seen a business continuity plan. What are some of the sections that would be in such a plan? Is there a template for it someplace, perhaps?
There are templates for them. Your insurance carrier a lot of the time will provide them. OSHA, I believe, has some templates for them. They are very complicated. They're usually going to start with, you really just have to dissect your whole business, every moving part of your business, because there's so many little things to think about with it. And so, like I said earlier, who's the key staff that actually enacts the plan is a big one. There's going to be a section on communication. So who gets notified and how are they notified, and what's the deadline for when they're notified, depending on what type of thing is happening. And
okay, so that almost to me sounds like when our kids are in school and there's a weather change that causes them to close the school, and they have a specific set of plans in place. They have call trees and other things that they've done to let people know that in this case, school is not continuing today.
Exactly.
It sounds like some of that is what's in the business continuity plan.
The same concept, and then they're really going to make you think about all the details. So say you're a local snack producer and your plant burns down. You're going to have to ask, okay, do we have contracts that we need to fulfill, that if we lose, we're not going to be a business anymore after we get rebuilt? And how are we going to do that? Are we going to outsource to another food manufacturer in the area to make it for us? Are we going to rent a space? What if it's not our factory that burns down? What if someone who makes a key ingredient in our snack burns down? Can we just order it from someone else? Is that going to hurt our quality? So I'm kind of going down a rabbit hole here, but that's what happens. There's so many little things that you probably usually aren't going to be thinking about that you're going to have to think about when making the plan.
So that leads me down a couple of different avenues. That sounds like the big problems we've had with the people talking the term now, supply chain resilience. You may be the supplier to somebody, and then you have all your suppliers. And even the large multinational companies have had a past history, and they've proven it yet again with this pandemic, that they don't really have control over their supply chain. Is that something you're seeing?
Definitely. It's a big issue. So this pandemic has helped people to realize they really need to have contingencies in place. But hopefully, if a business has good risk management people, they've already put a good continuity plan in place for things like this.
Okay, so I'm struggling with another thought that came to me as you were talking. I work with a lot of different people who own restaurants, not necessarily my clients, but I love restaurants. I love getting to know the restaurant owners, and I actually look at a restaurant as a manufacturing operation. A customer comes in, they make a custom order, it goes back into the kitchen, it gets produced, it gets delivered, and it's even greater. You don't have to wait 30 days to get paid. You get paid before the patron leaves. except for the few that walk out without paying. So those are small businesses. They all have a risk of a fire in the kitchen, and it happens regularly to, some business that's a restaurant that they'll have a fire in the kitchen. It's a lot of work to come up with a business continuity plan from what you described, and to keep it up to date. The turnover in a restaurant is horrible from a lot of perspectives because it's not a great career for most people. It seems to me I could spend more time planning than, we're in Nike territory, you just do it.
Yeah.
How do I balance what it takes to plan versus doing?
Honestly, that's a real challenge. And with almost every client that I deal with that is looking at continuity planning, my suggestion is to bring in a coach who does that, to bring in someone who has an expertise in that field, because like I said, it's just, you don't know what you don't know, and there's so much to think about, and it's a daunting task. It's a major undertaking to come up with a good plan. So I almost always recommend bringing in a third party if you don't have people on your staff that can dedicate a lot of time to putting it together.
Wow, that could be tough for small businesses. So what size businesses do you focus on then?
Typically, the business owners I'm working with are 10 employees and up, 1 million to 50 million in revenue, so pretty big range. And we do help plenty of startups get to that point. And those are the people where getting an introduction to the right person that can help get the plan in place are really going to benefit in the long run as their business grows, to already have those things done. But typically, yeah, it's 10 to 250 employees, 1 million to 50 million in revenue. And that's the space I operate in. I help a lot of manufacturers and a lot of contractors.
Okay. It's interesting that you say 10, because in terms of risk management and having a business continuity plan, I run across a lot of places where two people decided that they would work together and start a business, and they have little to no operating agreement, to detail all of the different things that might happen, such as partner A gets sick and wants out of the partnership. They don't have a buy-sell agreement, for instance, to deal with that. Is that something that your business insurance advisory business would get involved with as well?
Yeah, we can help with a lot of the time with, if someone does put together we don't help with the actual buy-sell agreement, obviously, but if someone is putting one together, a big part of that plan is going to, or agreement is going to be what we call key man or key person insurance. And so that's essentially just a life insurance policy that they are going to take out. The two owners usually are going to take out on each other, or the business will take out on one of the individuals. And this gives the partner an opportunity to essentially buy out, say one of the partners passes and it was in their will for their half of the company to go to their family, but there's nobody to step up and run the business in the family. The kids are young. And so this will give the other remaining owner a way to buy the family out, essentially, so that they still get what they had coming to them from the business. And it just makes it a smooth transition for the remaining owner.
Okay, so that works if there are two or more partners who are independent. But there are a lot of companies that are family owned or just a single entrepreneur. And what good would Key Man Insurance be just getting a bunch of money, if that person dies, like a life insurance policy, doesn't provide for somebody to run the business and meet all the obligations that it has. And it's even conceivable that that business, depending on how it's been set up, could be sued, and the person who died and their family might be obligated to pay up and lose all the money that has occurred as a result of the death.
Exactly.
What do I do then?
If you have any lenders whatsoever, they're going to often want you to carry that Keene insurance because they want to know that they're going to get paid if something happens. And so you may be depending on financing just to run your business, and you're not going to be able to do that in some cases without getting that policy. And if you're a one man running the business, but say you have a couple employees, and you want them to still have a place to work if something happens to you, or you don't want what you've built to just go away, it has been used to go towards hiring and training and replacing people that can run the business. But of course, that usually might not fit with your example of the one person, but that's another way it can be used in those situations.
I've never thought of this before, and it's maybe a difficult question for you, but I have a last will and testament. I have a trust set up. I have life insurance and things. And let me focus on that last will and the trust document. There's a whole bunch of things I have in there that, well, if I die, then my wife takes over. If we both die, then my son takes over. If all three of us die, then somebody else takes over. And eventually it gets down to, well, if all those people are dead or unwilling to serve at that point in time, then some bank is named as the trustee that will take care of doing things. I've never thought about applying that to a business and Keene Insurance and having a list of things and eventually getting to somewhere, where I could hire a company that's part-time CFOs or part-time CEOs as the final recourse for taking over my business if something happens. Am I way in the future kind of thinking here?
Well, no, that is something, that is a plan that people have written out at times. And again, it's going to be a situation where usually it's going to be a situation where the people operating the business don't have anybody to take over if something happens to them. Maybe their staff isn't quite at the level where they're ready to step into an executive position, but they don't want everybody to lose their job. And again, everything they built, the assets they've acquired for the business to be lost if something happens to them. And so having that plan in place gives them a way to, like you said, bring in an outside management team or whatever needs to be done in order to keep things afloat and keep people working.
Okay, let's turn our attention to an issue that you mentioned briefly, cybersecurity. It's a huge issue now. I've seen and attended some sessions where small companies of $10 and $20 million a year in sales have been held ransom for millions of dollars to get their IT systems back and running correctly. And I've learned that it often comes down to an employee doing something wrong. They respond to an email, they click on something. One of the best things that happened to me was a couple of years ago, one of my clients treated me as if I was an employee for them since I had been given an email within their system. And they forced me to take a 6-hour online course. And it proved to be very beneficial because it taught me about all the kinds of things that could go wrong. And then even today, I hear people giving in to the same things that they talked with me. So how do I talk to an insurance underwriter to help them understand that I've done something to avoid having my company be ransomed or in other ways harmed by cybersecurity?
So there's a few things you can do. One is they like to see that if it makes sense, depending on the type of data you're dealing with, they want to know that you are encrypting files and encrypting disks. They want to know just really how you're managing people's personal information. But like you said, the human element really is the key factor. So if you haven't already done a big training or regular trainings with your staff on how to watch for phishing emails, how to watch for ransomware, they're either going to want you to do that as part of getting the coverage, or they themselves will actually provide that training to your employees as part of your premium. So you're essentially already paying for that service with a lot of your cyber insurance now. But some carriers, depending on your risk, if you haven't done that yourself, they're going to require you to use their services at least to go through those trainings and in order to lock in whatever rate they quoted you with and keep it there.
That's something I hadn't thought of, that they would actually be providing the training for your employees as part of the underwriting process. That's great.
Yeah, it's actually a relatively new theme, with cyber becoming such a common theme. I think the statistic I most recently read was they're expecting it to be every 11 seconds next year that we have a ransomware attack, for something like $20 billion is what they're expecting in losses. So just being ready for that and is really important to the carriers. And they're just, the insurance world is adapting to the new risk, and they're learning that it needs to be done. And so it's just part of your premium a lot of the time.
So I've been involved in electronics a lot in my career, in software development. Plus, I've been involved in the maintenance of legal documents and rules about how long to keep documents and things. But one of the things we had to do for a long time was we had to have second copies of important documents stored in a salt cave somewhere in the Midwest. And then we had to have backups. And, we would have a backup in our office. We'd have a backup at home. Today, we are all using the cloud for a lot of things. What category of insurance and risk does all of that go into? It doesn't quite sound like cybersecurity to me.
It does fall under the cyber umbrella. It's part of your data breach. And so in your case, the reason for that was if documents were physically stolen or if there was a fire, you always had a backup. And it's the same concept with if you have, say, a ransomware attack. Say one of your employees gives a cyber criminal access to your system and they lock all your information up. Having that backup on another disk or in another location means that hopefully in a short period of time you can get back up and running and not have to pay out any ransom to whoever's hacked your system.
So I was thinking in terms of just something goes wrong, somebody upgrades a software package and something else breaks. And so you always like to have a backup so you can go back to the previous version of software in order to get things back up and running. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure a cybersecurity policy would cover something like that.
That's more less of an insurance thing and more your information security team and your IT team that would be helping with things like that.
Proof is in the pudding. That's a strange term, I know. I don't have any idea where it came from. But I recently did a interview with a couple of fleet guys who were using camera-based systems to see what their drivers were doing in terms of looking forward out of the cab of the truck, as well as being able to coach the driver about driver distraction by having cameras that look back at the driver. And they were primarily looking at what are called nuclear verdicts, where people are being sued for hundreds of millions of dollars in getting court jury trials that are awarding these huge amounts for some level of negligence claimed on the part of the driver. They were in a position where they had applied this camera technology, and they were able to prove that their accident rate had declined because of what they were doing. So they not only had a plan, if you will, but they had proof that the plan was working and improving things. So they were able to initially take their insurance from 9 cents per mile down to about 6 cents per mile. And then once they reached that, they were able to competitively quote their insurance then, and they were able to get down to 4.5 cents per mile. So there's a case of actually proof in the pudding, not just I did a few fire drills or something. I imagine some of the underwriters would love to have that kind of documentation to show that your risk management plan is really working. Or I'm sorry, your loss, what was it? Loss control system is actually.
Loss control plan, loss control system, yeah. Yeah, no, that's a big one. And business auto in general, the losses have been so huge lately, and the rates are going up so drastically. Um, Companies are finding they have a lot less options with what carriers they can have their business auto with. So anything you can do to help put them at ease is gonna go a long way for you. And with the cameras, it's huge in that all of those incidents where, you know, the courts a lot of the time are just siding with the individual against the company, and so unless you have some hard documented evidence of what actually happened, a lot of the time you're going to be paying out on something, or your carrier is going to settle. And so yeah, that's critical to have those systems in place.
Yeah, within my industry of that I often work in, of trucking, they recently found some people who were scamming, and they've now been prosecuting the lawyers and the people involved in those accident scams, because they had people that were driving cars and intentionally pulling in front of a truck and causing an accident, and the driver couldn't do anything about it. But the initial verdicts went with the claimant against the driver, but then they were able, through camera systems and others, to start to prove that this was something beyond the normal kind of situation. So interesting.
Yeah. Another similar example on the false claims is a plumbing client that I just helped with loss control. They have really good techs that typically didn't cause damage, water damage, and things like that. And they started seeing a pattern in losses, and they figured out they already took before and after pictures of anytime there was damage when they got there, so that they could say, hey, this was already here when we got here. And then here's the after we finished the job, we didn't do any more damage. But now they're doing it on every single job, because on the jobs where there wasn't damage and they didn't take a before photo, people were having water losses, and they had a couple $20,000+ claims. One was close to $100,000, where they really were pretty confident that it wasn't an error on their tech's part. They were pretty sure it's something that happened after the fact.
Yeah, I can understand that. I've had a toilet replaced, and I have wood that was damaged before the toilet was replaced. And so, yeah, it's not their problem, but I can see that there would be some people out there who would make a false claim that the leak occurred, the damage occurred after the plumber was there. I've also noticed when I get an email now from Amazon, or mostly from Amazon, UPS hasn't started doing it. I actually get a picture of my package placed in by my door, so that they know and have proof that it was delivered, and here it is.
Yeah.
They must be getting some claims that you know people are stealing their packages, or it was never delivered, and so this is their protection against that.
Yeah, I think it's both of those things. I think a lot of that has to do with keeping their drivers accountable, and because they have a lot of independent contractors that they don't really vet, so that helps them know that they're actually getting the packages where they need to go.
Okay, as we finish up here, then can you perhaps give us a list of 3, 5, 7, 10, whatever number of key pieces of loss control planning we should be working on?
Well, we kind of touched on two of them. I have 3 sort of coverage or risk areas that are really important right now. We talked about cyber, we talked about business auto. A third one that we didn't really talk about is EPLI, or employment practices liability. So starting with the cyber, again, we talked about some of the things. Having your employees trained is going to be huge. And actually, with all of these risks, that's going to be huge, because the human element is going to be your biggest factor in losses. So having data backups, having your employees trained is going to be critical on the cyber. On the business auto, having the fleet maintenance plan, pulling motor vehicle reports and screening drivers before you hire them to drive. Having the cameras. The cameras are huge. More and more companies are doing the cameras, not just forward and rear facing, but also driver facing, so that they can coach drivers when an incident happens. And then back to the EPLI, with that, it's really important right now that either you have a really good HR person on your staff, or maybe you have a consultant you can talk to about that, because with everybody working from home, and with all the COVID stuff right now, there's just been so many wrongful termination suits. It's one of the biggest losses to businesses during the pandemic lately, and we're going into another social pause, so I expect there to be more blowback from that. And so just again with that one, just the best loss control for that is knowing when the state of Oregon sends out a letter saying, hey, workers' comp really does pay on COVID-19, you need to know that, so if someone tries to claim it, you're not saying, oh no, you can't do that, and then also have an EPLI claim on your hands.
And so remind me what EPLI stands for again.
It's Employment Practices Liability Insurance.
Practices. Okay, thank you.
And so that's your hiring, your firing. It also, back to like the plumber example earlier, if one of your techs goes out into the field and they go into someone's home and someone claims that your tech harassed them or did something inappropriate while they were in their home, that falls under your EPLI. And so it's just a major exposure right now, and it's hard to find the coverage. Or can be challenging to find the coverage during the pandemic with all the losses they're having.
Okay, that sounds to me like if you're a company with just 10 employees, good reason why you shouldn't allow your accountant to be your HR person, and you should be looking to hire an outside HR company to take care of all of those things for you.
Exactly. It'll be worth the investment, definitely, to have the right people on that.
Joshua, as we close then, I am certain that after people have had a chance to hear you, they're going to want to contact you to learn some more and consider engaging with you to get some insurance coverage. How do you want them to get a hold of you?
Well, a really good way to find me or reach out to me is on LinkedIn. It's just Joshua Keene, AAI. Or I'm happy to take a call. My office number is 971-255-5214. I'm also good on email, so feel free to shoot me an email.
Joshua, it's been a pleasure having you. Again, this is Paul Menig with Business Accelerants. I'm working with business owners and leaders to get them more money out of their business and more time for their lives. And based on today's discussion, we want to make sure that you don't have money going out to plaintiffs who are suing you. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks for having me.